Flipped Lesson 3.04, A Revolution in Transportation and Communication. This goes along with your Human Odyssey reading pages 457 to 473 and your student guide pages 305 to 311. Lesson Introduction, A Revolution in Transportation and Communication. For thousands of years, a millennia, people traveled mostly on foot. A wealthy few had horses to ride, and those who could moved goods in wagons. Travel on water relied on wind and currents. Most communication was by word of mouth. Then, in the late 18th century, a revolution occurred in transportation and communication. Road construction improved. Steamships plowed the waterways. Railroad engines hurtled across the countryside. Communication became as instant as the pulse of electricity along a telegraph wire. And all of this occurred in the span of a lifetime. Learning objectives for this lesson. Many of these objectives are covered in detail in the readings from your Human Odyssey book, pages 457 to 473. Describe the need for better roads in the 17 and 1800s and the attempts to improve roads. Describe the rise of the canal building in the late 1700s and early 1800s. Explain how better transportation led to more trade and lower prices for goods. Identify Fulton and his contribution to steam-powered boats. Identify Morse and his contribution to rapid communication. Identify Stephenson and his contribution to railroad travel. And recognize the changes that the revolution in transportation and manufacturing brought. Trace the development of railroads in the first half of the 19th century. I'm going to begin on page 310 of your student guide. So make sure you turn to page 310. All right, question number 1. This covers 1, 2, and 3. The roads in the late 1700s were muddy and rutted and made travel difficult and unpleasant. The condition of the roads would affect trade. It would stunt trade between different locations because it would be too difficult and time-consuming to move goods from one place to another. Turnpikes were roads with gates and guards and could only be used after a payment of a toll. Number 4 and 5, McAdam roads. One advantage of the slightly raised roads built by John McAdam was that they were built on a foundation of crushed rock. They drained well, they held up to heavy traffic. In the early 1800s, improved roads in Britain led to increased trade and lower prices. Questions number 6, 7, and 8. It had always been easier to move heavy cargo over water than over land. When the need for better transportation became apparent in the late 1700s and early 1800s, there was a surge in the building of canals. The development of canals in Britain. Parliament passed laws directing that rivers be dug deeper and wider. Private firms cut canals at key points and connected rivers. Thanks to a web of waterways, boats could reach towns that they had never been able to reach before. Canal building also became popular in the United States. A famous American canal was the Erie Canal. Questions 9 and 10, the steamboat. Robert Fulton gets popular credit for inventing the steamboat. He was not only a gifted inventor, but he was also a good businessman who managed to establish a regular steamboat service. In addition to sailing on rivers and lakes, some steamboats even made it across the Atlantic Ocean. Questions 11 and 12, the railroad. George Stephenson was the inventor of the rocket. The man acknowledged as the father of the railroad. As with canal construction, railroad construction also took off in the United States, where some began talking of building a railroad that would stretch all the way from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Question number 13, the manufacturing revolution. The transportation revolution also led to a manufacturing revolution because manufacturers now produce goods not just for local consumption, but also for distant consumers and markets. People no longer had to make locally the goods they needed, but could buy them from distant manufacturers instead. Increased demand from growing markets led to an increase in factory size. Questions number 14 and 15, Samuel Morse. Samuel Morse invented the electric telegraph as well as a special code to use on the telegraph called Morse code. The electric telegraph spread across the United States by following the railroad tracks west. Explore and discuss. Answer this question with your thoughts. What means of transportation or communication breakthroughs might the future still hold? How would they affect you, the society in general, and our economy? So you can take a few minutes on your own to reflect and answer on that question. And then this is an optional activity on page 309. You can take a look in the spaces on the left column. You can list 10 things that you regularly do on any given day. And then when you finish, list in the right column how you would have done those things if you lived in the late 1700s. So imagine having to walk to a friend's house to set up plans for a day together. Couldn't just call them on the phone. Makes you wonder what you would do with all that extra time in your day. And here we come to the end. The Industrial Revolution was another of those extraordinary jumps forward in the story of civilization. Thanks for joining me today.